The old woman lay on the mat, and everyone in the compound knew she would not see another sunrise. Her name was Mama Amaka, 74 years old, wrapped in a faded white cloth, her breathing slow and labored like a generator running out of fuel. Outside, the harmattan wind pushed dry leaves across the compound floor. Nobody swept them. It felt wrong to sweep when death was already standing at the door. Her daughter Adaeze sat beside her, but not close. She sat at the edge of the room near the window, pressing her phone against her thigh, waiting for a call from Lagos. She was 38 years old, impatient, and tired of poverty. She had been in the village for 4 days already, and every day her husband Amaka called from the city asking the same question. Has she gone yet? That question should have shamed her. It did not. Mama Amaka lifted one bony hand.
Adaeze, come.
Adaeze crossed the room and knelt, the way custom demanded, even when the heart was elsewhere. The old woman's eyes were still sharp, the kind of eyes that had seen 30 harvests, buried 2 husbands, and raised 6 children on a piece of red earth that nobody else had wanted. That land, Mama Amaka whispered. The one behind the mango trees. Your grandfather's grandfather cleared it with his own hands. The soil there is covenanted. It will feed every child that carries our blood, but only if it stays in our blood. Adaeze nodded. She had heard this story 100 times. I am giving it to you, the old woman said. Not to sell.
To keep.
To farm. To pass to your children the way it was passed to me. I hear you, Mama. Say it back to me. I will not sell the land. Mama Amaka closed her eyes and exhaled. A faint smile crossed her dry lips. Within 2 hours, she was gone. The burial was modest. The mourning was real, except in Adaeze's chest, where something else was already calculating. 3 weeks after the burial, a land developer from Port Harcourt drove into the village in a white Jeep. He was looking for plots near the expressway extension. Adaeze's plot sat directly in the proposed corridor. He offered 2 million naira. Adaeze's hands did not shake when she collected the money. They shook much later. But by then, the papers were signed, the covenant was broken, and the old woman's last breath had already become a verdict. The first sign came that same night. Adaeze dreamed of her mother standing at the edge of that land, her white burial cloth bright under a moonless sky. Mama Amaka did not speak. She only looked, with eyes full of a grief so deep it had no name. Adaeze woke up sweating. She told herself it was the heat. She was wrong. It was the beginning. 2 million naira felt like freedom. Adaeze and Amaka moved fast. They paid off their rent arrears in Lagos, bought a second-hand Honda Accord, enrolled their 2 children, Chukwudi, age 12, and little Nneka, age 8, in a new school with uniforms that actually fit, and put the remainder in a fixed deposit account. For the first time in years, Adaeze slept without her chest tight with worry. She told herself the dream meant nothing. She told herself her mother was at peace. She bought a new Bible and started attending a prosperity church in Surulere, the kind where the pastor wore designer shoes and promised breakthroughs with the confidence of a man who had never doubted himself. For 4 months, things were good. Then the Honda's engine failed. The mechanic said it had never been properly maintained. The seller had disguised old damage with fresh paint and a detailed interior. Repairs cost nearly 300,000 naira. Amaka paid it, grinding his teeth. The fixed deposit account matured. The bank had a system error. The interest was never credited. By the time it was resolved, inflation had eaten what should have grown. Amaka lost his delivery contract.
Adaeze took a trading job. She bought fabric wholesale from Balogun Market and resold it to offices. For 3 weeks, she was making progress. Then the woman who owed her the largest debt relocated without warning, taking Adaeze's entire consignment as unpaid balance. Every venture rotted. Not dramatically, there were no fires, no floods, no obvious disasters. Just a quiet, persistent unraveling. Every naira they earned seemed to arrive already spent. Every opportunity slipped through their fingers like water through a cracked clay pot. Chukwudi began having nightmares. He started waking up in the middle of the night, screaming about a woman standing at the foot of his bed in white, pointing at him without speaking. Adaeze recognized the description immediately but told no one. Then Nneka fell sick. A fever that came and went for 6 weeks, doctors found nothing, treated everything, charged for both. She grew thin and quiet, a child who used to sing while she bathed, now sitting with her knees drawn to her chest, staring at walls. One evening, Adaeze's elder sister Chidinma called from the village. "The land you sold," Chidinma said without greeting. "They started clearing it last week." "I know," Adaeze said. "They found a spring underneath the soil. A freshwater spring. The developer is calling it a gold find. He's selling water rights to 3 companies. He will make 50 times what he paid you." The phone felt heavy in Adaeze's hand. "Adaeze." Chidinma's voice dropped. "Mama always said that land had living water under it. She called it the covenant source." Adaeze ended the call. She sat on the floor of her kitchen with her back against the refrigerator that no longer cooled properly, and for the first time since the burial, she wept. Not for her mother. For herself. For the unbearable clarity of what she had done. But clarity, she would learn, is not the same as escape. By the 2nd year, there was nothing left to lose, and then they lost more. Amaka started drinking. Not the social drinking of a man celebrating, the quiet, methodical drinking of a man building a wall between himself and his thoughts. He was not cruel. He was not violent. He was simply absent, even when seated at the table, even when his children spoke to him, even when Adaeze placed her hand on his and said his name. Chukwudi stopped speaking. It happened gradually, then completely. The boy would open his mouth and close it again, as though the words dissolved before reaching air. His teachers sent notes. A speech therapist found nothing physically wrong. A child psychologist said it was trauma response, but trauma from what? The family had not experienced any single catastrophic event. Just a long, slow erosion. Just the steady withdrawal of everything that had once held them together. Adaeze began visiting prayer houses. She went to a white garment church where a prophet soaked her feet in herbal water and told her the problem was from the ground. She went to a Pentecostal deliverance service where a minister rebuked every ancestral spirit for 45 minutes while Adaeze cried and shook on a plastic chair. She went to a traditional medicine man in Mushin who burned something that smelled like regret and told her to bring a photograph of the land. She did not tell any of them what she had done. How could she? To confess was to confirm it. To confirm it was to accept that she herself had constructed this suffering with her own 2 hands. Then Nneka stopped eating. Not from defiance, from absence of hunger. The child simply forgot to want food. She grew lighter, fragile, a paper version of the singing girl she had been. The hospital ran every test available. Everything came back normal. A normal child who was quietly disappearing. One night Adaeze sat at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., the house silent, and she spread out everything she could find. The land sale agreement, her mother's old photograph, a small bag of red earth she had taken from the compound the day of the burial. She didn't know why she'd taken it, only that she could not leave without it. She placed her hand on the red earth. She had not prayed in weeks, the kind of real prayer, the kind that does not perform. She prayed now. Without words at first. Just shaking. Just the body's private language of despair. And then she spoke aloud, into the silence of her kitchen, to her mother. "Mama. I knew. I knew what you asked of me. And I sold it anyway. No thunder. No vision. No dramatic sign. Only the weight of a truth finally spoken, and the terrible stillness that follows when an admission arrives too late to change anything." She thought of the freshwater spring now flowing freely under land that carried a stranger's name. She thought of the developer photographed in the newspaper beside the excavated water source, grinning with the easy satisfaction of a man who had found treasure that was never his to find. She thought of her son who no longer spoke, her daughter who no longer ate, her husband who no longer saw her. And she understood, fully and finally, that the curse was not a punishment sent from outside. She had built it herself. Decision by decision. Naira by naira. Signature by signature. The question now was whether understanding it was enough to survive it. Adaeze went back to the village. Not for a holiday. Not for a burial. She went back the way a wounded animal returns to its origin, instinctively, without argument. She stood at the edge of what had been the land. The mango trees were gone. Machinery had chewed the earth wide open. A concrete water processing shed sat where the old boundary stones once marked covenant ground. She knelt. She told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for so long she thought he had not heard her. Then he put down the groundnuts and looked at her with eyes that held no rage, only the profound tiredness of a man who had seen too much to be surprised. "Your mother knew you might do it," he said. "She cried before she called you to her side." Adaeze's breath left her body. "She prayed that if you broke the covenant, the consequence would teach your children without destroying them," Uncle Obiora continued. "She asked that the punishment stop at your generation, if you confessed before a blood elder on the soil of this compound." "I am confessing now." "You are confessing now," he agreed. "But the land is gone. That cannot be undone. What she asked is that the curse not pass further. Your children can still be free, but you must do 3 things. He told her the 3 things. They were not supernatural. They were not easy. The first was a full public apology to the extended family at the next gathering. She would have to speak her sin aloud in front of everyone. The second was the return of whatever remained. She would have to give back into family hands the only asset she still owned, the plot of land in Amaka's name at the outskirts of Lagos, the one they'd been holding as future investment. The third was a vow to physically plant a garden on whatever family soil remained, and tend it herself, every season, for 5 years. She agreed to all 3. The family gathering was brutal. There is no other word. Aunts who had never confronted her to her face said things she would carry for the rest of her life. Cousins looked away. Her elder sister Chidinma wept, not in anger, but in the grief of someone who had watched a disaster approach and been unable to stop it. Amaka did not come with her. He was still in Lagos, still drinking, still absent. She could not save him yet. She could only begin. She signed over the Lagos plot. She planted the first seeds in the back of Uncle Obiora's compound, not symbolic seeds, not ceremonial seeds. Pepper, fluted pumpkin, bitter leaf. Plants that demanded daily attention and returned something real. 3 weeks after the confession, Chikwudi spoke. Not much. Just his sister's name, at breakfast, handing her a cup. But Nneka looked up and answered, and that morning she ate a full plate of rice for the first time in 5 months. Adaeze stood at the kitchen doorway watching them, and she did not allow herself to feel relieved. Relief would be too light for this moment. What she felt was something heavier and more honest, the sober recognition that what her mother had tried to give her was worth more than all the money she had chased, and that she would spend the rest of her life paying back a debt she could never fully clear. The land was gone. The spring still flowed for strangers. But the curse stopped at her. And every morning she rose before dawn and drove to that compound and knelt in the soil with her hands in the earth, planting and watering and being present, the one thing she had refused to be when it still would have cost her nothing.